This is a 777-page intelligence test that will make you smarter. But the catch is, you gotta read the whole thing. And the fact of the matter is that the first test is the one that weeds out a lot of people, including me back when I was a younger man. The book is Gödel, Escher, Bach by Douglas Hofstadter. And I have this confession to make, that I did, as a young man in university, fail its first test. I started reading this legendary brick of a book, Gödel, Escher, Bach, which some people fondly called Geb, but when I hit the very first puzzle, I couldn't solve it. And so, I did what many people have done. I quit. And then I put the book down for 20 years. Big mistake. Big mistake, because I can tell you right now, being like many people, the masses who give up, that's a completely avoidable tragedy that you can dodge simply by holding course when reading challenging books that feel above your level using the tips and strategies I'm going to share with you today, including very difficult books or books that seem really difficult in the beginning. And Gödel, Escher, Bach is so interesting because it covers everything from logic to biology to symmetry to music, even Zen Buddhism. No wonder it's the kind of book that breaks the resolve of so many people. Now, obviously there are cases where you do want to stop reading certain books, but in so many situations, the reasons we give up on books just aren't legit. And to lay out my cards, I'm mostly a completionist. And there's a little bit of a tip I'm going to give you later about how you can become a completionist too. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but I think you're going to really appreciate it. Anyway, when I finally got myself to return to Gödel, Escher, Bach, I realized that by giving up on the first puzzle, I had actually missed the entire point. And that's because this book isn't about hard-to-solve puzzles. It isn't about math or art. It's all those things, of course, but it's a portal into the mind of a polymath. And it's a look inside how Hofstadter stacked a number of skills together to provide a manual that cannot help but make you smarter, more mentally resilient too. So what you're getting today is not a book review. Far from it. You already know I think it's amazing. And there's no secret coming here about being a genius who solves everything instantly. It's about not quitting prematurely when you don't understand and equipping yourself with the tools that help you keep moving forward. Because Douglas Hofstadter, he himself failed to understand many things, but using his polymathic skill set pushed through to produce a Pulitzer Prize winning book. And he didn't just write the damn thing, he actually designed it. It reminds me of Christian Book, who we featured last week with his Xenotext project. He also was involved in a lot of typesetting of many of his books, and this kind of design thing is a deep characteristic of many polymaths. And like Christian Book, Hofstadter learned to code and also how to produce his own translations when working with texts in other languages other than English. And to better understand some of the musical principles that Hofstadter shares in Gödel, Escher, Bach, he even learned how to compose music. You can hear some of Hofstadter's extraordinary music on YouTube by searching for a piece called Balzerka and read in the description of that music the interesting reason that it has that name. So, the first important point that will help you solve puzzling books is that Hofstadter didn't acquire the skills that he had to read difficult books, to solve puzzling problems. He wasn't born with this stuff. He doesn't know necessarily how to do all these things. He acquired his skills, and to a large extent because he learned to treat learning as an open-ended process, not a linear path, not always a cause and effect situation. And he certainly didn't stop when things got too hard or outside his field. He got out of his lane. Now, these are polymathic behaviors we can model. And I know I've used that word polymath a few times now. If it's new to you, poly just means many, and the math part comes from manthonine, which means learning. So it means to be a person of varied learning, but with a catch. Having depth and breadth. So we're not talking about being a jack of all trades, but really, really getting both the substance and some real time in the ditch, so to speak, of the skill or the topic area you're trying to learn. And, even if the skills we can model from other polymaths are not intuitive to us, well, that's the point. If you have ever learned music, for example, or spent any time with real deal musicians, you know that no matter how good they are naturally, they still have the ability to perform a lot of those difficult lines. Why? Well, I know this answer personally because I played in the Outside, which was a band packed with world-class musicians. Just go watch Alberto Atala's drum videos on Instagram or listen to Sergio Klein's riffs and solos. Genius. And if I had sat around thinking that I had to be naturally gifted to play with those guys, I wouldn't have gotten past the first jam session. They're that good. No, what it was and what got me invited to be the first bass player and the fourth bass player of that band was so much simpler. They saw a guy willing to put in the work, someone who had clearly already put in a lot of work into music, but to continue training and to make the counterintuitive intuitive. And that's what Gödel, Escher, Bach helps you do, so long as you don't give up at the very first sign of trouble, which Hofstadter, I think, is kind of genius in a way to throw at you very, very soon with an unsolvable puzzle. But if you give up just because of that, well, then you're going to miss out on so much. But it's not just about this book. It's about many, many books. And we're going to talk about how to get past that. But one of the first things is to change your attitude, really. And, that's ultimately what I didn't have, was the right attitude. So I gave up on Gödel, Escher, Bach. And this was a big mistake because tricky old Hofstadter, he just makes the opening kind of like auditioning for a band. And just like you never finish growing as a musician because the puzzle of performance is unsolvable. And that leads us to the next lesson that you can learn today. Let's call it intellectual empathy. And by the way, if you like being introduced to cool new terms like intellectual empathy while continually exercising your mind, but you're new here, get subscribed and join my mission to help people stop talking themselves out of developing their personal genius. You are a genius and you can develop it. And for the love of learning, the love of memory, and never giving up on yourself ever again, smash that thumbs up. A little harder, please. I'm actually quite deaf from all those years on the road with my band, so I can't quite hear you yet. Oh, yes, there we go. I think I hear you. Okay, so intellectual empathy. Here's what I mean. If you read Gödel, you'll find incredible explanations of Zen Buddhism, for example, which is surprisingly hard for some of us to wrap our minds around. I mean, I'm such a knucklehead that I actually had to memorize almost 2,000 words of Sanskrit to get a hold on the meaning and the deep humor of it. And then after that, I started to understand a little bit of what's going on in Zen Buddhism. And then, wow, it was just amazing. But I could have sworn that Hofstadter was a believer. He writes so well about Zen in this book that something totally blew me away, because a few years after I finally sat down and read Gödel non-stop over a 7-day period in my favorite park in Brisbane, I read an interview with Hofstadter where he said, "I hated Zen." Now, in retrospect, I don't think he's exaggerating. Yet, he explored Zen deeply enough to teach it beautifully. That's how you get smarter. You entertain ideas you don't agree with. You explore concepts that frustrate you. You hold the tension of opposing views without needing to win or solve them immediately. Perhaps without needing to solve them ever. In the oodles of Sanskrit phrases I've memorized, there's one line that speaks to this attitude that you can adopt anytime very well. And in Sanskrit, it is Tirtva Moharnavam Hatpa Ragadveshti Rakshashan Yoga Shantasanta Yuktatma Ramovrajate, which basically means something along the lines of, those who kill the like-dislike monster in the ocean of delusion come to dwell together in tranquility. Oh, isn't that so beautiful? Now, the like-dislike monster is something that is, going to take some work. And that's maybe not what Hofstadter had in mind exactly. But he tells a lot of really vibrant and fun stories in Gödel, Escher, Bach that remind me of that line that I memorized. And, that kind of empathy that you have, well, you've got to develop it, because you're cheating yourself out of so many books that have such wealth to give you, because you can't kill your like-dislike monster. Now, this whole project and the fact that he designed it himself and so forth, it was deeply inspiring on my Memory Detective project. And book 2 is called Vitamin X. And it has that Sanskrit line I just recited in it, actually. And it's dropping soon, so stick with me if you want to be part of a very special live event that's going to be part of the launch. Okay, so my next suggestion for you isn't a tip in Gödel, Escher, Bach so much as it's something that I just would love for you to know about, and maybe you can model it in your own reading, because I've been using it since I learned the strategy in grad school at York University in Toronto. So I was reading Roland Barthes' SZ at one point, and he's like, why do we always read books from beginning to end? Why do we not want to know who the murderer was until the end? Like, why not just, well, the butler did it, and then enjoy the actual writing, right? And that got me thinking, I'm like, why am I always reading these books in order? And so I started to read the ending of books very, very often. And this helped me a great deal, because in so many cases, reading is, or can be, what you might think of as rhizomatic. So I'm not saying to not read books in their entirety. I often read books in entirety, almost all the time. I'm a completionist. But I don't read them in a linear fashion. I treat them like a root system, like rhizomes, where I connect them sideways, backwards, diagonally. And so if you are reading something hard and you get stuck, well, keep reading, don't quit. But don't necessarily keep reading from the beginning over and over and over again so that you somehow magically create a snowball effect and get all the way through the book. Understanding is never a guarantee of reading. It's a process. And, same thing in entertainment. You're never guaranteed entertainment. Lately, I've been reading Homage to Catalonia, and, it's the weirdest thing. I kind of got bored with the beginning, and so I skipped to the middle. And the middle has some amazing and interesting passages. And they reignited my interest in the beginning, which suddenly made a lot more sense to me, why that beginning was playing out the way that it was. And then after reading the first 3 chapters, I went to the appendixes. And then I found out that chapter 4 had been completely pulled from this edition and put as an appendix, plopped in the back. I still don't quite understand why, but this leads to another tip that I think you would be well served to understand. If you're struggling to understand what you're reading, not only can you skip around and read it out of order in order to create all kinds of effects, and there's more to say about reading out of order, but another thing that's really going to help a lot of people is that when you can't understand a book, it's not necessarily your fault. Many writers are just simply not very good. And as someone who has written many books and sold over 100,000 copies of them, I have struggled many, many times to get a single sentence straight enough to fly like an arrow into your brain. And I'll be the first to admit that when people don't understand me, it's my fault as the author for not being clear enough. In fact, writing is a skill you have to practice over and over and over again, just as much as you also have to practice reading. And as strange as this might sound, You have to practice learning to read bad authors. There are a lot of the best ideas that are written by people who put themselves through the pains of something they're not skilled at in order to communicate those ideas for us, right? Now, whether or not AI is going to change that in the future or is changing it right now remains in question. There's a really interesting book that you might want to look into. It's called Just Being Difficult. And I read it years ago. It's a book of essays, basically, people going back and forth. Is academic writing difficult on purpose? Does it have to be difficult in order to communicate certain points? Or is it possible to say difficult ideas simply? And a lot of people say, well, if you can't say it simply, you just don't understand it. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all. Architectonic tautology is a term that I can't think of how to express in any other way that doesn't require oodles of sentences. If you just take the time to figure out what architectonic tautology means, it actually is very, very functional, and I am not just being difficult by insisting that it's worth learning that term rather than having long speeches about it. And the onus is on the student to learn it. There's no bad writing in that term, right? So I think that sometimes, we might just want to be difficult on purpose in order to compress language amongst specialists. But the point really is, and the tip is that you shouldn't go around blaming yourself if you don't understand a book. It might be the author. It's not always you. And when I find something tricky to read, here's what I often do. And I have to remember to do it, but it's a very, very powerful technique. I read the difficult passage out loud. So let's go back to how I got to play with some very highly trained world-class musicians, because in my mind, it's a very similar thing. In the outside, we played some really tricky rhythms at times. At least they were very tricky for me, but I also was with these guys, and I saw them learning and messing up and making mistakes, and they didn't get it always from the get-go. And even on stage, sometimes the best of the best make mistakes. Anyway, the number one rule that I always had to remind myself is something that I learned from Alberto Atala. He said, if you can sing it, you can play it. And that was just earth-shattering for me. It was a game changer. Because when I first heard this riff, for example, my brain told me, there's no way you're going to learn to play that. But that negative little voice in my brain, it was wrong because I vocalized it. And there's lots and lots of examples like that. Anytime that I get frustrated, I just play the music in my mind and I get it through my mouth, and then I basically feel what it's like to have my fingers play it. Then I get my instrument in my hand, and bang presto, I have learned music that theoretically is above my skill set, but apparently not, because I've been on tour playing it, right? So it's the same thing in grad school with very, very difficult texts that have crazy terms, far crazier than architectonic tautology, or also just Shakespeare, I came across some very, very long and twisted sentences that were mission critical for my final exams, and I just read them out loud. And even to this day, again, I got an A in grad school in courses on Shakespeare, but I still have to memorize lines from Shakespeare to figure out what the heck a character is saying and then say it out loud myself to really work it out. Why I have not another tear to shed. Besides, this sorrow is an enemy, and would usurp upon my watery eyes and make them blind with tributary tears. Then which way shall I find revenge's cave? For these two heads do seem to speak to me. And on. But the point is, I have to think about all these little words and what do they mean and so on. And then I'll go, oh my God, that's such a powerful line from Shakespeare, right? So the point is that Hofstadter's actually a really great writer if you can pass his opening test. But like many, many books, we often fail. or we get our like-dislike monster going. I actually really like Hofstadter's style, but you might not gel with it. But that shouldn't stop you from reading, right? You could benefit from even the most difficult and unpalatable, unchewable text out there and come to understand it by simply getting in the habit of reciting the words out loud and maybe even writing some of those words and writing them from memory may help. It certainly helps me. Writing on paper is really not that different than playing notes on an instrument because you're expressing the ideas you've practiced verbalizing or sounding out through your mouth and then getting them through your fingers or your hand and then seeing the production in front of you. So read, remember, recite, write down, and you're going to have a much easier time absorbing ideas that feel completely foreign to you. And then the next thing you know, they're going to be your own. Now, speaking of fingers, I've got one major tip left to share. But I mentioned how much Gödel, Escher, Bach inspired my latest project, Vitamin X. This is a teaching novel that shows you how to use memory techniques, and it involves a hand. And it also involves a mnemonic 7-day calendar that will help you remember more of your life. And so you learn a hand memory palace, you learn these techniques for remembering the days of the weeks and all the events that happen in them. And just like Gödel, Escher, Bach is packed with stories that help you learn and helped me understand deep relationships between logics, computation, biology, math, and music, I realized that the best way to teach you the mnemonic calendar technique and the hand memory palace wasn't another textbook, but a memory detective novel, a mystery you actually want to finish. And now, part 2, the follow-up here, is about to be released. And I don't think you have to read part 1, although some of my biggest fans are saying, please do. Well, anyway, to celebrate the launch, I've put together a bundle where you can get the paperback, the ebook, and the audiobook all in one go. But the most important part is that if you get the bundle during the launch week, which is coming up soon, you get a free ticket to a live event. And we're going to hang out and learn the calendar technique and the hand memory palace strategy from the book together in real time. Now, if you missed the launch, you can get these books later independently. But make sure to find the link below so you can sign up for advance notice so you can get this bundle and be there live. Oh, and I promise I rewrote this book 9 times so that each and every sentence flies as true as I could possibly make it as the mere mortal I am compared to the god-level writer behind Gödel, Escher, Bach. I just wish I hadn't said no to Hofstadter and his intellectual empathy too soon back, or should I say Bach, when I was a silly little youth who hadn't yet learned how to turn off that negative voice that says you're not smart enough. That voice is a lie. It was a lie to me and it's a lie to you. You don't need to be a genius to read Gödel, Escher, Bach, but you might just need to be a bit more stubborn. You need to decide that confusion is not a stop sign. It's just part of the scenery. How you embrace that stubbornness is up to you. But since I push myself to be more stubborn about learning hard topics all the time, feel free to join the Magnetic Memory Method mission in whichever way is right for you, be it with a copy of Vitamin X or the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass, or just watching more videos here on my channel. Speaking of videos, if you want to see another example of an older historical figure who used, so to speak, stubborn habits to become a polymath who mastered multiple fields of knowledge and various skills in a way that made him wealthy, influential, and ironically quite humble, well, there's a tip for you. Be humble and watch my video on the polymathic learning habits of Benjamin Franklin next.